Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that your life could look completely different 1 year from today? And it all starts with one small habit, one simple 5-minute daily practice. I want to start with a story, my story. A few years ago, I felt stuck. I wasn't where I wanted to be, but I wasn't sure what needed to change. I was overwhelmed by big goals that felt impossible and paralyzed by the idea that I had to overhaul everything overnight. Sound familiar? What if I told you that your life could look completely different 1 year from today? And it all starts with one small habit, one simple 5-minute daily practice. Now, I know how that sounds. It sounds almost too good to be true, right? Because when we think about transformation, we imagine massive leaps, dramatic overhauls, and big sweeping changes. But the truth is, real transformation doesn't happen like that. It's not a movie montage where you wake up one day, decide to change your life, and suddenly everything falls into place. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in the quiet, consistent moments, the small, almost invisible shifts that build momentum until one day you look up and realize everything is different. I want to share something with you, a moment from my own life that, in hindsight, completely changed how I see growth. A few years ago, I was stuck, and I don't mean stuck in the way we all sometimes feel after a bad day. I mean truly stuck, like I was walking through quicksand, sinking a little more every time I tried to move forward. I had goals, but they felt so far away that I didn't even know where to start. And the truth is, I was scared. Scared that I wasn't capable of the changes I wanted to make. Scared of what people might think if I failed. Scared that maybe this was it, that maybe I was destined to live a life that didn't quite fit, like a pair of shoes a size too small. But then something shifted. It wasn't a grand epiphany. It wasn't a big, bold decision. It was a whisper, an idea that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to figure it all out at once. Maybe I just needed to take one small step. So I made a decision. I set aside 5 minutes every day, just 5 minutes to sit down, be still, and check in with myself. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. Honestly, it felt a little silly, like I was wasting time. But something surprising happened. Those 5 minutes became the one place in my day where I felt completely honest. I started asking myself questions I'd been too busy or too scared to ask before. Questions like, what am I avoiding? What am I proud of? What do I really want? And that's when it hit me. The answers were already there. I just hadn't been listening. I share this with you because I know how easy it is to look at where you are right now and feel overwhelmed by the distance between where you are and where you want to be. I know how tempting it is to think you need a complete overhaul, a whole new strategy, a whole new plan to make a real change. But what I learned, and what I want you to know, is that the most powerful changes don't start with big moves. They start with small, intentional moments. They start with tiny decisions that remind you who you are and who you're becoming. And here's the thing, those small decisions, they're not flashy. They're not going to make headlines or go viral. But they matter. They matter more than we give them credit for, because every time you show up for yourself, even for just 5 minutes, you're building trust. You're proving to yourself that you are worth the effort. And let me tell you, there is nothing more powerful than knowing, deep down, that you can count on yourself. So today, I want to ask you something. Are you willing to give yourself 5 minutes? Are you willing to make a small promise to yourself and actually keep it? Because here's what I believe: 5 minutes can change your life. Not because it's a magic bullet, but because it's a door. It's a doorway to clarity, to courage, and to the kind of growth that sneaks up on you and surprises you with its power. I didn't know when I started this practice just how much it would reshape my life. But looking back, I can see it clearly. Those 5 minutes were the first domino. They set off a chain reaction. I started seeing patterns, realizing the ways I had been holding myself back. I started noticing my own excuses and challenging them. And little by little, I started making different choices. Not big ones, small ones. The kind of choices that don't look like much in the moment, but over time add up to everything. And I want to leave you with this. I know what it feels like to want more for your life, but feel completely unsure of where to start. I know what it feels like to carry around a vision of the life you dream about and yet feel paralyzed by the gap between here and there. But I also know this: it doesn't have to be complicated. Change doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to mean tearing everything down and starting from scratch. Sometimes the most profound transformations start with something so small, so simple, that we almost overlook it. And I don't want you to overlook this, because your future self, the one who's more confident, more fulfilled, more aligned with their purpose, that version of you is waiting. They're waiting for you to start, and all it takes is one moment of courage, one decision to show up today, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Because those 5 minutes, they might just be the beginning of everything. Let's be honest, change is terrifying. The unknown is scary, and not just in the way we think about fear, like the fear of failure or rejection, but in the way it unsettles us at our core. Change threatens our sense of security, our routine, our identity. Even when we want it, even when we crave it, there's this instinctual part of us that fights it. Because as much as we desire growth, we're wired for safety. And safety often looks like staying exactly where we are, even if where we are doesn't feel good anymore. I've learned that the hardest part of change isn't the work it takes to make it happen. It's the courage it takes to start. It's the courage to sit with the discomfort of not knowing what comes next and still choosing to move forward. That's the part no one talks about, right? We celebrate the breakthroughs and the results, the big wins. But what we don't often see is the messy middle. The part where everything feels uncertain, and you're questioning whether it's even worth it. That's the part where most people give up, not because they're incapable, but because they mistake discomfort for failure. They think if it feels hard, it must mean they're doing it wrong. But here's the truth I need you to hear: discomfort isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're growing. It's a sign that you're stepping outside of what's familiar and into something new. And that's not easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things we'll ever do. I remember the first time I really leaned into change, how everything in me wanted to run the other way. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaky, and my mind was full of what ifs. What if I can't do this? What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? But the scariest question, the one that haunted me the most, was this: what if nothing changes? What if I let my fear keep me stuck? That question is what pushed me forward, because as terrifying as it was to imagine failing, it was even more terrifying to imagine staying exactly where I was, feeling disconnected, unfulfilled, and unsure of who I was becoming. And I think that's true for most of us. Deep down, we know that the risk of staying the same is greater than the risk of trying and falling short, but knowing that doesn't make it easy. Courage isn't about being fearless. Courage is about showing up even when you're afraid. It's about trusting yourself enough to take the first step, even when you can't see the whole staircase. And here's what I've learned: once you take that first step, something shifts. It's like a crack forms in the wall of doubt and fear. And suddenly, light starts pouring in. You begin to see what's possible. You begin to believe, maybe for the first time in a long time, that change is not only possible, it's already happening. But here's the catch: change doesn't happen in one giant leap. It happens in the tiny, unglamorous steps we take every single day. And that's why so many people quit before they ever see results, because they're waiting for something big and dramatic to prove they're on the right track. They're waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel motivated, waiting for some kind of sign that says, this is it. But what if the sign you're waiting for isn't coming? What if the only sign you need is the one you create by showing up? That's what courage is: showing up even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when you're not sure it's working. It's choosing to keep going, not because you feel ready, but because you're willing. And let me tell you, willingness is more powerful than readiness, because readiness waits for the perfect moment, but willingness creates the moment. And that's the invitation I want to extend to you today: to be willing to sit with discomfort, to be willing to trust yourself, even when the path isn't clear, to be willing to believe that you are capable of more, even if you don't see the evidence yet. Because here's the truth: growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. It happens in the spaces where we feel stretched, uncertain, and exposed. I'll never forget the first time I heard someone say, you can't be brave without being vulnerable. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Because for so long, I thought bravery meant being strong, having all the answers, and pretending like I had it all together. But real bravery, it's messy. It's admitting you're scared and showing up anyway. It's letting yourself be seen, even when you're not sure what people will think. It's falling and getting back up, not because it's easy, but because you know deep down that you're worth the effort. And that's what I want for you to know: that you're worth the effort, to know that you don't have to be fearless to change your life. You just have to be willing to take the first step. Because here's what I've learned: the first step doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. So, if you're waiting for a sign, let this be it. Let this be the moment you decide that your fear doesn't get to call the shots anymore. Let this be the moment you stop waiting to feel ready and start trusting yourself instead. Because courage isn't about knowing how the story ends. It's about believing in yourself enough to turn the page and start writing the next chapter. So what's the habit? It's this intentional reflection. Every day, just 5 minutes. Sit with yourself, breathe, and ask, what did I learn today? What am I grateful for? What do I want to create tomorrow? It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? Too small to make a difference. But that's where we get it wrong. We assume that change has to be big to matter. We assume transformation only counts if it's dramatic and visible. But the truth is, the biggest shifts in our lives often start in the quietest, most ordinary moments. They start when we stop running and finally allow ourselves to be still. I know this because I've lived it. I used to think growth was something you chase, something you earned through hustle and grit. I thought success was about doing more, pushing harder, and checking off boxes as quickly as possible. And for a while, that approach worked until it didn't. Until I found myself burned out, disconnected, and unsure of what I even wanted anymore. That's when I stumbled onto this habit. I didn't know at the time that it would change everything. I just knew I was tired of feeling like I was always 2 steps behind, tired of carrying around this constant weight of not enough. And so, almost out of desperation, I started carving out 5 minutes at the end of each day to just sit and be with myself. No distractions, no to-do lists, just me, a notebook, and a few simple questions. At first, it felt strange. I wasn't used to being still. My mind would race, running through everything I had done wrong or everything I still needed to do. But I stuck with it, and slowly something started to shift. Those 5 minutes became the most honest part of my day. They became a place where I could let go of the noise and actually hear myself think. I started noticing patterns, little things I had been ignoring, like how often I dismissed my own needs or brushed off moments of joy because I was too busy chasing the next goal. I started seeing where I was out of alignment, where I was saying yes when I really wanted to say no, and where I was playing small because I was afraid to take up space. And here's what surprised me most: it wasn't the answers that changed me. It was the act of asking the questions. It was the willingness to show up for myself, even when I didn't have everything figured out. It was the reminder every single day that my growth didn't depend on perfection. It depended on presence. Because that's what reflection does. It brings you back to yourself. It creates a space where you can be honest without judgment, where you can celebrate your wins and confront your fears without running from them. And the more you do it, the more you realize that clarity isn't something you have to go searching for. It's already there, waiting for you to notice it. I can't tell you how many times those 5 minutes saved me, how many times they kept me grounded when life felt chaotic, how many times they helped me make decisions that were scary but right, and how many times they reminded me of my own strength when I was starting to doubt it. And the best part, it didn't require a massive overhaul. It didn't require me to change my entire schedule or give up hours of my day. It just required me to pause, to stop long enough to actually see what was happening inside of me instead of just reacting to what was happening around me. That's the beauty of this habit. It's simple, it's accessible, and it's powerful not because it fixes everything instantly, but because it teaches you how to trust yourself. It teaches you how to sit with your thoughts instead of running from them, how to get curious about your emotions instead of avoiding them, and how to turn the noise in your head into insight that moves you forward. I think we forget sometimes how much power there is in simply paying attention. We're so used to chasing the next thing, the next goal, the next version of ourselves, that we lose sight of where we already are. And yet the path to where we want to go almost always starts with acknowledging where we are right now. That's what reflection gives you. It gives you perspective. It shows you what's working and what's not. It helps you connect the dots between your habits and your results. And it reminds you that growth isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. And here's the thing: when you make reflection a habit, it doesn't just change how you see yourself. It changes how you show up in the world. It changes how you approach your relationships, your work, and your dreams. It changes the way you make decisions because you're no longer operating from autopilot. You're choosing consciously to live with purpose. I've seen it happen, not just in my own life, but in the lives of so many others. People who felt stuck, lost, or overwhelmed started carving out 5 minutes a day to check in with themselves, and suddenly things started to shift. Not overnight, but steadily. Quietly. Like the way the seasons change, not all at once, but little by little, until one day you look around and realize everything feels different. And that's the magic of this habit. It doesn't require you to be perfect. It doesn't demand that you have all the answers. It simply asks that you show up, that you be willing to listen to yourself even when it's uncomfortable, that you be curious about what's possible even when you're not sure you're ready. Because the truth is, growth doesn't happen in the big, dramatic moments. It happens in the small, consistent ones. It happens when you decide day after day to stay connected to yourself and your vision. It happens when you're willing to trade certainty for curiosity, perfection for progress, and busyness for intentionality. And it all starts with 5 minutes. 5 minutes to sit down, take a breath, and ask yourself what really matters. 5 minutes to remind yourself that your voice, your dreams, and your growth are worth paying attention to. 5 minutes to plant the seeds of change and trust that, with time and care, they'll grow into something extraordinary. I'll never forget the first time I tried this practice. I had spent so long running from my thoughts that the idea of sitting still felt unbearable. I was the kind of person who filled every second of my day with something: work, errands, emails, scrolling through my phone, anything to avoid slowing down. Because slowing down meant feeling, and feeling meant facing things I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But 5 minutes? 5 minutes felt doable. 5 minutes felt safe. So I sat down and I tried. And to be completely honest, it was uncomfortable. My brain resisted the stillness, rushing to remind me of all the things I hadn't done, all the tasks waiting to be checked off my list. But I stayed with it just for those few minutes, and when the timer went off, I felt something unexpected: relief. Not because I had figured everything out in that one sitting, but because for the first time in a long time, I had given myself permission to pause, to stop running, to stop trying to fix everything and just be. And in that pause, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. Not clarity about the big picture, but clarity about the next step. And that was enough. That first day, I wrote down just one question: what do I need right now? And the answer surprised me. It wasn't something big or complicated. It was rest. It was breathing room. It was a reminder to let myself off the hook for not having it all figured out. That tiny moment of self-awareness opened a door. It showed me that maybe I didn't need to solve everything at once. Maybe I just needed to listen. And that's how it started. 5 minutes a day turned into 10, then 15. Over time, it became less of a practice and more of a ritual, something I looked forward to, something that grounded me. I started noticing the way those few minutes began to spill over into the rest of my life. I felt less reactive, more intentional. I started making decisions based on what I actually wanted instead of what I thought I should do. And slowly, almost without realizing it, I started to feel more like myself again. But it wasn't just me. I started sharing this habit with friends, with clients, with people who were feeling the same sense of overwhelm and disconnection that I had felt. And what amazed me was how universal this experience was. People from completely different backgrounds and situations, all dealing with different challenges, started reporting the same thing. They felt clearer, calmer, more in control of their choices, not because their problems had disappeared, but because they were showing up differently. They were paying attention. One friend told me that she had been stuck in a job she hated for years, but she was too afraid to make a change. When she started this habit, she began to realize that her fear wasn't about the job itself. It was about losing the sense of identity and security it gave her. And once she saw that clearly, she started making moves, not big, risky ones, but small steps that helped her build confidence. 6 months later, she was working for a company that aligned with her values and actually excited her. Another friend shared that after years of putting everyone else's needs before her own, she realized through this practice that she had completely neglected her health. She wasn't eating well, wasn't sleeping, wasn't moving her body. But instead of beating herself up, she started using her reflection time to set one small goal: each day drink more water, take a 10-minute walk, go to bed 30 minutes earlier. And before long, those small steps turned into habits that transformed the way she felt physically, emotionally, and mentally. And it's not just about the big changes either. Sometimes the most meaningful transformations are the quiet ones, the way you start speaking to yourself with more kindness, the way you let go of perfection and embrace progress, the way you finally start trusting your own voice. Because that's what this habit is really about. It's not about doing more, it's about being more present, more aware, more intentional. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't require you to change your entire life overnight. It doesn't ask you to overhaul your schedule or commit to hours of meditation. It just asks you to show up for 5 minutes. It asks you to sit with yourself and listen. And I know that sounds simple, but if you've ever tried it, you know how powerful it can be. Because the truth is, most of us spend so much time avoiding ourselves. We stay busy, distracted, and disconnected, not because we don't care, but because we're scared of what we might find if we stop long enough to really look. We're scared that we might not like the answers, that we might have to face truths we've been avoiding. But here's the thing, avoiding it doesn't make it go away. It just keeps us stuck. And I don't want that for you. I don't want you to keep living on autopilot, going through the motions and wondering why you still feel unfulfilled. I don't want you to keep waiting for the right moment, the right plan, or the right level of confidence to start living the life you actually want. Because the truth is, you're never going to feel completely ready, and that's okay. Growth doesn't come from being ready, it comes from being willing. Willing to sit in the discomfort, willing to ask yourself the hard questions, willing to be honest even when it's messy, and willing to trust that even the smallest steps are moving you forward. That's what this practice is about. It's about learning to trust yourself again. It's about remembering that you already have the answers, you just need to create the space to hear them. And I get it. 5 minutes doesn't sound like much. It doesn't feel revolutionary. But that's the point. It's not supposed to be overwhelming. It's supposed to be sustainable. Because real transformation doesn't happen in one big leap, it happens in the small, consistent moments where you choose yourself, where you choose growth, even when it's uncomfortable, where you choose to listen, even when it's hard.